part that awesome. So everyone's aware that, there's a little letter that gets put on our birth certificate, and that little letter is, and we're all adults in this room, so that little letter is associated with the anatomy that we're born with, right? Like a baby comes out either with a penis or without a penis, and the doctor looks at that and then puts a letter on the birth certificate, and that's something we call sex assigned at birth. And the reason I'm getting real basics with this is because in our society, sex assigned at birth for hundreds of years now, especially in American culture and very sort of conservative American culture, has been a presumption of gender. So that from that moment that little letter is put on a birth certificate based on one observation from birth, society then perceives that infant, and as that infant grows up in society, as that letter, right? So that means that a baby is born with female reproductive anatomy, and as I'm sure we've all experienced, within within a year, everything that some family members are getting that little baby is pink. Everything that little baby is getting is associated with being hyper feminine and perhaps a caregiver, and with babies or flowers or very delicate things. And then along with that, a presumption of language, of course. So she is a little girl, and oh, look, she's a very girly girl, or she's not a very girly girl, right? And then there's even, what does that phrase girly girl mean, right? So all of this starts at a sex assigned at birth. But the thing is, most people don't realize that what actually happens for everybody, like all of you listening to this right now, everyone sitting on the panel, everyone everywhere, is that our bodies have a physical anatomy to them, and that doctors do look at that physical anatomy and put a letter on our birth certificate because of that physical anatomy. And our brains develop a gender identity between the ages of 2 and 4. That's a separate thing entirely from the sex we are assigned at birth. Now, for 99% of people, they're not different. They align in the sense that the body that someone is born with, the physical anatomy. So I'll use myself as example. I was identified as male at birth based on the anatomy that I was born with. And then as a 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old, I said, yeah, I'm a little boy. That's how I identify. That's who I am. And I've never felt like I wasn't a boy in my gender identity. So my brain and the body parts I have happened to match up. All right. So what that means is that 99% of us are walking around with body parts and gender identity in our brain that align. And that can make it really hard for us to understand that there are also a lot of people for which that's not true. And historically, like I would say in the last, really in public life in the last 2 decades, we've been pretty good at acknowledging that transgender people in a very binary way exist. So you are assigned male at birth, you're transgender. That means you must only want to identify as a woman and be seen as a woman and be hyper feminine, and that's it. And so you're trans. Okay, I understand that. You are assigned male at birth and you identify as a woman, or you're assigned female at birth and you identify as a man. And then that's it. And I think personally, one of the main reasons, ooh, that's so much better. I can see everyone's faces now. I think one of the main reasons that we think that way or have thought that way is because, again, it's just us trying to make sense of it with what we've got. My brain and my body parts aligned in a gender way that makes me feel like everything should just be binary because that's what makes sense. So, okay, you were a boy, you are a girl, that's simple, I can handle that. And then in the last 10 years or so, we've seen much more public visibility around transgender people who identify outside of that binary. Or as folks transition, maybe they transition sort of along the binary, but in different parts of it in between, along the spectrum rather, that sits between that binary. So First of all, transgender people didn't start existing in the last 20 years. And non-binary people didn't start existing in the last 10 years. The reality is queer people like myself, all LGBTQ people, have existed for forever, right? The human condition is such that some people are born, about 10% of people are born LGBTQ plus in some way. Just because people are finally politically and socially brave enough to talk about it doesn't mean we haven't existed the entire time. And there's actually tons of history on cultures that have had these multiple genders, different diverse identities within genders since cultures began. There's actually cave drawings of transition. So I'm saying all that because we get caught up in our own culture sometimes and think, this is all brand new. This is too hard. There's no way we can make any sense of this. I don't understand how I'm going to say they, them, when I really am talking about just one person. I don't know how it's possible that someone could identify outside of the binary because that's never existed before. No, that's not true. We've always been here, including all of our non-binary siblings, right? They've always existed. We're just giving it language and visibility now. So moving out of sort of that little education lesson, I want us to think about a couple of simple things before we jump into this. First of all, the language piece of this is important. And maybe it's not important to us because we ourselves don't have experience or don't think it's that big of a deal. But I'll just provide some context on a few things. When someone's asking for a different pronoun to be used, oftentimes, unfortunately, people perceive that as sort of a want, a request, it would be great if you did that. But what a lot of people who don't use pronouns that are different from the pronouns that people might assume that they use is the history that that person has with that pronoun. So for example, if you've been transitioned for 4 years before you ever came to college, your whole high school career you were living as a guy and going by he, him pronouns, and then you get to school and you request that, and someone's not using that, someone's calling you she, her, especially if they've already been asked not to do it, that person's doing something called misgendering. And the reason that can be a big deal is because transgender people are what seems to be most at risk for suicide and also homicide right now. 40% of all transgender people have already attempted to kill themselves. So in the same society where we live, where people think it's just sort of extra to try to figure out they, them pronouns, or someone's changed their pronouns this week and they're just really attention seeking. In that same world where people think that way is the same world that just by existing, transgender people at a rate of 40% don't want to exist anymore. So the importance here is obvious. We just don't talk about it very much. And for those of us who don't use different pronouns, we don't think about it. But you don't think about the fact that a child who's transgender may have been bullied and beaten by their parents or their siblings or their school classmates using the pronoun that they're asking someone not to use. Or somebody may have had so many experiences in life with either male or female pronouns, and they finally felt like their true self when someone started calling them they pronouns. Why would we take that away from anybody? It's such a simple thing. So I'm going to end with two things. One, I'm just going to end the debate. They is a singular pronoun. That's it. Like, we can talk about it for days if people want to go into it, but you know, like if I was, whenever I've led a conference, if someone leaves something in the room, I don't walk up to the front desk and go, hi, someone left this in the room and he or she were sitting at this and he or she, no, I would walk up and say, someone was sitting in the back during my session, they left their phone, they forgot their jacket. So just let them know. They were wearing a blue baseball cap. So they is already a singular pronoun for gender neutral usage. That's the first thing. And the second thing I'm going to end with just a bit of a joke so that we can lift this up a little bit. I want you to raise your hand in the audience if you've ever been out and you've seen like a real cute dog or like a super cute, or maybe not so cute because they're not always cute, baby. And you said, oh my God, what a cute dog. He's adorable. What's his name? How old is he? Or I love your baby. She's beautiful. Look at her. Raise your hand if that person then said, my dog's actually a girl, or the baby's actually a girl or a boy. Has that ever happened to anybody on stage even? Yeah, I'm seeing hands. Yeah, absolutely. You know what we do right after that happens? We apologize. Think about it. We apologize to a dog that doesn't speak our language or understand the concept of gender identity whatsoever. And then, kicker, we change the pronouns we use. For a dog, for a baby. But a 19-year-old who's probably seeing a therapist, maybe taking hormones, probably experiencing a lot of dysphoria and discomfort in their body. They're coming into a new space like college, and they're asking for their identity to be respected. And a lot of folks, unfortunately, can't give them the same level of respect that we give dogs and babies. So just bear that in mind, you know, as we move through this conversation. That's why Aleka said this can't be the only time we have this conversation. It has to move beyond the room. And we have to really acknowledge that this is an important, very real thing that we are responsible for. And so with that, I will pass it back over to Aleka to run the panel and say thank you all for your attention and time.
Thank you, Keith. Keith brought, not Keith. That's Keith. This is Nate. So thank you again. And we just have a few questions for you, talking about the Pride Center specifically. Can you briefly describe the work of the Pride Center for those who are unfamiliar?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Pride Center of the Capital Region is actually the longest continually operating Pride Center in the country. It's 52 years old. It's located just off of Lark Street in Albany, Center Square area. We offer a lot of community services. So right now we have a staff that runs about 35 hours on average of mental health services a week for free. So these are for LGBTQ people of any age and any need. They reach out to us. We actually have a waiting list of about 6 months right now because we're constantly having people call. The need is high. So mental health services are a big chunk of what we do. We're really proud of that work. We're definitely planning on continuing to grow that work. On top of that, because not everybody's looking for that individual care or highly clinical style of work, we also run several groups. So Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday nights, we have groups for people 18 plus. Monday is Men's Pride, anyone man identified who's attracted to men. Trans Pride is Tuesday night. Anyone trans identified can come. Wednesday night's Women's Pride, women attracted to women. And Friday night, those are all 6 to 8 p.m. Friday night is Youth Night. That's 4 to 8 p.m. where we do group social time and also great support group work. And we got a few other groups that we're starting up. We have a class that's starting. I want to really rep this. So yoga Thursdays from 6 to 7, starting April 14th. We just redecorated a whole studio space. It's going to be great. Entirely free. And then we're starting a group for parents. We're planning on starting a group for allies in general. So we're really excited about that. And then we have one other community piece, which is we go out and do a lot of training. So I'm in conversations with Russell Sage, but also there's lots of other schools in the area, colleges, as well as high schools and middle schools that we want to go in and do training with. We do already do training with medical facilities. We work with, we just spoke at a space a few weeks ago, really helping people understand how to be more gender affirming when they're working with clients as they're doing intake. And asking intake questions. So we do all of that slice of work as well, which is also really important. So we do a lot of internal community focused work, and then we do a lot of external educating work. And the last thing I'll say on that is that it's because like I said, we're about 10% of the whole population, we LGBTQ people. But the reason that we 10% have so much need and mental health risk, and we're overrepresented in so many other spaces, is because the 90% is creating a culture and a space and an environment that makes us feel unsafe. So we have to work with both.
And Nate, can you describe why this type of work is so important to you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So generally, I'll say, when I was in my graduate program getting my master's in social work and focusing on leadership and policy, the research around LGBTQ teens, specifically the outcomes from mental health, so depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, attempts, as well as the rate of LGBTQ kids in foster care, which is about 30%. So I just said we're only 10%. So we're 3 times more likely to end up in foster care as a kid. And then 40% in runaway and homeless youth population. So 4 times more likely than other teens to be homeless. Those things all made me really angry. So I felt like I had to find some leadership, and step into a space where I could help address some of those things. And if I'm being really honest, also utilize, and just for others out there, the white privilege that I have, that many white people do have, we all white people have. I wanted to use that for good, to support my community, especially the Black and brown and trans pieces of the LGBTQ plus community. But on a personal note, I started getting bullied when I was 7. I was called FAG when I was 7 years old, and I'm 37 years old, and I was called that last week, walking my dog in Albany. So I'm also on fire for this work because not enough has changed if 30 years have passed and it still happens. I'm strong enough that I can deal with that now, but no one should be dealing with that anymore. So personal note, it's because it's a very real thing I still face every day.
Have you seen improvement in your time as executive director of the Pride Center?
Well, it's my 9th week, so that would be incredible if I had seen improvement since 9 weeks ago. But I will say 2 things. In my time working in this space, so I've been working with the state government for 3 years before this. What I have to say, and I'm excited about this panel because I think that this is proof in the pudding, and I'm hopeful that the message that are provided today or will be carried out of this room, but that people care. Every time I go to a training, the people who are the most afraid to say the wrong thing, it's because they care so much and they want to say the right thing and they don't know what to say. And so finding ways to make those people feel comfortable and safe to try is really important. And I've just seen so much growth in folks acknowledging, you know what, I don't know anything about this topic and I need to know more. So that's some growth I can definitely say in people I've seen in the last few years. And I'll say in the 9 weeks that I've been here, there's a lot of community excitement about learning. And that I think was unexpected for me, is that there's so many folks who are really excited about learning as much as they can about all of this and want to come volunteer and help make this happen. So I think that, yeah, there's definitely been some growth I've even seen.
What is something that people who don't identify as transgender or non-binary should know about being an ally to the community?
Oh, okay. So I could talk about this a lot, but I'll say it this way. The reason I always talk about the difference between your gender identity forming in your brain and your sex assigned at birth forming in your body biologically is because I don't think that anybody who's cisgender, and for those who don't know, that's just not transgender, right? Like I'm cisgender. If you're out there wondering if you're cisgender, then you are probably cisgender. Like that's kind of how it works usually. So we don't have any framework to understand what it's like when our brain and our body are at odds with each other. That's privilege. We live in a ton of privilege around that, a ton. And it's really easy for us to pretend like this isn't a really big deal. But it's really a big deal because transgender folks are murdered at a higher rate every single year. It's a really big deal because, like I said, 40% of trans adults have already tried to kill themselves. It's a really big deal because in society, there are these little ways in which people can be disrespected over and over and over again. And it's usually by something that the other person doesn't even know that they're doing it. You know, I was sitting with a really good friend of mine, a trans woman. She'd recently transitioned and much later in life. And it didn't even cross my mind. She and I were sitting at lunch and the waiter kept calling us guys. Hey guys, what are you gonna have? Hey guys, hey guys. And her physical distress and anxiety went through the roof. I saw my friend go from being my friend at the lunch table to freaking out and being stressed and being suddenly like much younger and much more scared of being in public as a woman than she'd ever been before. And I had to have a conversation with the waiter about just, hey, for the rest of our meal, if you could just try not to use the word guys, just say you all. Are you all ready? That'd be great. Because we walk through life with privilege and think it doesn't matter. And the trans people we hurt every single day, it does matter, even when we don't realize we're doing it. So try. Like, that's why it's important. We have to try. We exist in privilege. The world will cater to us all of the time. We have no idea what it's like to be an 11-year-old transgender girl and know that you're going into puberty and your voice is going to drop, or that you have an Adam's apple for the rest of your life, or that you'll never menstruate ever. Right? Like, these are very real things transgender people think about and deal with on a daily personal basis every single day. I'm never afraid to go use the bathroom. I look like the little symbol that they put on all the men's bathrooms. But when you're in transition, when you're non-binary, that's not the case. So it's important for us because we, like I said before about the 10%, 90%, the 99% is actually creating this unsafe space for the 1% of trans folks out there. So we've got a lot of work to do. It's our responsibility to make a world where less trans folks want to be dead. That's why it's important to me. And that would be my message to all of you cisgender folks out there, is that just try. You being uncomfortable about a pronoun or messing up or feeling a little stupid when you raise your hand in class and introduce yourself and use pronouns pales in comparison to the way trans people feel every single day. And that's what I would actually throw out there as a little challenge to all of you. There's so much introducing that you all do all the time in groups and in internships and in programs and obviously in classes. Be the first person to say, hey, my name's Nate, my pronouns are he and him. Don't get into anything after that, just do that. It's uncomfortable. You will feel uncomfortable. You're not going to want to do it. Just do it. I promise you, any queer people that are in the room that hear you do it will feel safe and appreciated and seen. And so just try. That would be my big advice.
Last question. What current projects are you working on, and is there a chance Russell Sage students can participate?
Wow. Yes. A couple of things. First of all, I don't know if you all are aware of this, but we haven't been allowed to have the Pride Festival for 2 years. So in 2019 was our last chance. We had 30,000 people here in Washington Park and all over Lark Street, and it was so great and exciting. And then COVID. And so we've missed it 2 years in a row. So first of all, we are having Pride Weekend this year, and it's going to be a blowout. It's June 11th and 12th. We are doing it, we're calling it Pride Weekend from now on because it's in conjunction with In Our Own Voices, which is the Black and Latino LGBTQ org here in Albany. And they are going to be doing their Saturday event, Black and Latino Pride, and then Sunday will be our event, the main event, Capitol Pride Parade and Festival. And we need tons of volunteers. And by that, I mean, we need someone who can be here a little early and help us put stakes in the ground and set up tables and put up chairs and then march in the parade a little bit, make sure that the people don't get out of line, and then just stay and have a really great time. So you can go to 518capitalpride.com. 518capitalpride.com to see ways to register and volunteer. To join. So that's first of all. Would love to have people come volunteer for us at our big Pride Parade Festival this year. It's going to be awesome. But we're also going to have a whole bunch of other events throughout the summer because we did miss Pride for 2 years. So absolutely need people to come volunteer for those. But secondary, if you are LGBTQ identified and you're listening to this right now and you're like, hey, I'd love to volunteer for something like more personal, meaningful, all of the groups we run are volunteer led. So we constantly need folks who would like to come sit and hold space with some LGBTQ youth on a Friday and chat, you know, and we help you learn how to do that, and we vet everybody and work with you. But just consider that you could come and be a volunteer and offer some time to help run a group. And then on top of all that, we're doing so many things in this building. It needs a lot of updates. And so we're doing stuff in the backyard. So also just come on down. We're at 332 Hudson Avenue. You can literally just come down at some point during the week and say hi to me and everyone else here, see the building and chat with me about something you want to help out with.
Give it up for Nate, guys. Right now we can shift gears and put Trish on the hot spot. Hey Trish, what are your plans on a policy level to implement inclusive language such as pronouns?
Thank you, Alexa. And Nate, thank you for bringing back Pride. I have a 15-year-old, and when I asked her what her favorite holiday is, she says it's the Pride Parade. So it's great. It's a fun weekend. Y'all should check it out. So thank you, Alexa. In terms of gender inclusive language, there's a couple things I'd like to share with the group. Some of you may or may not know we actually do have a gender inclusive trans policy that addresses some things related to language, especially it addresses students who have a chosen name. So if you have a name different than the one legally assigned to you, we have a process by which students can identify that to the college, and that name then can appear on things like your student ID, the roster that your faculty get when the class begins. So when class starts, if I identify as Trish and not as something else, I'll be called by the name that I've identified as my name. I think more inclusive in that way. One change that we've seen recently, I think some of you may have noticed, that the student information system that we use, Colleague or Data Evolution, made a change recently that allowed us to record preferred pronouns. So when registration started this spring, you get the data form every year that asks you to go through and verify your email change, address change. That form allowed students to enter pronouns. We got a lot of really positive feedback from students about that. So those pronouns are now displayed on the colleague screen that a college employee is seeing when they're working with you. So if you go into financial aid and they pull up your record, they're going to see a banner at the top that has your demographic information. It'll display your chosen name if you have one, and it will display your pronouns. Ideally, then that employee can refer to you by the pronouns that you've identified as the pronouns that you prefer. So that's a great change. We're very excited about that. We've been collecting preferred pronouns at the point of admission, but it's only this year that we've been able to pull those into our student system. So in 4 years or so, we should have preferred pronouns for any student enrolled who's provided them to us. And over the course of the next few years, we'll try to collect those from as many students as choose to provide them to us. I mentioned the policy that we have. That policy was written in June of 2017. So we've had a gender policy for about 5 years. It needs some updating, and so there is a committee that's going to be looking at that policy and making sure that it's addressing all of the things that we want it to. Primarily, some of it's just not current anymore because it was written at a time when we still had the women's college, and so there were some very specific things about how you matriculate to a women's college depending on your gender identity and so on. None of that's relevant anymore, so we're going to be pulling some of that out and re-examining to make sure we're including everything that's important. One of the things that's become more important in the last couple of years is pronouns for students. We have students who are more interested in sharing their pronouns and wanting those used, and that's not as addressed in the policy as clearly as it probably should be based on what students are telling us now. So we'll be going through the process of looking at that policy and revising it to make sure that it is meeting the needs that are being identified by our students.
Is this plan going to be shared with the rest of the SAGE community, including students, or just among the professors and faculty?
No, certainly will be available to everyone. I mean, the policy that we have now is actually available publicly, you could go and look at it again. Part of it just isn't current anymore. So when the policy is revised, we will send it out college-wide so that students see it and so that faculty and staff see it as well. When we wrote the policy the first time and introduced it, training went along with it. So employees received training. In fact, the Pride Center at the time, an employee from the Pride Center came and did training. I know that in student life, we did a fairly extensive half-day training for every employee in student life. And then we had other one-hour trainings for employees in other areas. And we especially encouraged employees who work in service areas to attend those trainings. And there was also a specialized section for faculty. And I know that Barbara's exploring additional training. So if we revise this policy, send it back out, we need to accompany that policy with training to help people understand how to understand and follow the policy so that students are able to get what's shared for them in the policy, what's described for them in the policy.
Are there going to be consequences if these policies are not followed? And if so, what are they?
Sure. Well, I think that we're an educational institution. So our first priority needs to be to educate folks about why the policy exists, what the intention of the policy is, and how they can ensure that they're following the policy. So that would be our first response, whether it was a student or an employee. If we found that there was a student saying, this person's not, using my chosen name or my pronouns, we're going to start with, please, let's review this policy with you. Let's help you understand how you can comply and why it's important. And that would be our first response always. But if something persists, right, and there's a student or an employee who's just not following or is continuing, that's harassment at that point. And we do have a discrimination harassment policy, and a student or an employee who felt as if they were being harassed always has the right to file a complaint, and that would be investigated. And if necessary, there certainly would be consequences for a student or an employee who was misgendering or was not following the policy and using the proper pronouns or chosen names identified for a student.
Did you ever think, as a person of the LGBTQ community, of the older generation, did you ever think that you were going to ever have this conversation?
We've had this conversation in student life. We have this conversation. I'm happy that we're having it more broadly, college-wide. I also have teenagers at home, so we have this conversation, and I'm encouraged by what I hear from my own kids who are just a little bit younger than current students, and they're cisgender, heterosexual young people who demand that their friends are treated in the way that they should be treated. They think nothing of stepping right up to defend and make sure that people are getting what they need. So it's coming, and we have to get on board and understand these issues. And again, our job is, we're an educational institution, and especially for undergraduate students, right? I sometimes say our job is to grow adults. We're helping you prepare to move out into the world. And in this world, you're going to deal with all kinds of folks. If you're a nurse, if you're a teacher, if you're an occupational therapist, you're going to have trans clients or students or patients. How do you meet those students' needs or those patients' needs with dignity and with respect, and allowing them to be their authentic self in the space where you're meeting them? And that's our job. So it's important, and I'm happy that we're having a conversation.
Thank you, Trish. Give it up for Trish. All right, these next set of questions are going to be from myself, Morgan, and Keith. This is going to be more of the personal experiences as people who do identify to be in the LGBTQIA community. I hope that you can get our stories today and apply it to your lives as well. All right, Morgan, first question. What is your identity within the LGBTQIA community?
All right, so first I'd like to say that my identity is ever evolving. Right now, I identify as non-binary and pansexual, which just means that I don't identify with a gender binary, and when I'm attracted to people, it's because of who they are and nothing else.
I feel like it all should be like that, right? Keith?
Okay. So I identify as non-binary, and queer. And I'm not absolutely disagree with you. If I'm into someone, it's because they are annoying. I actually a year ago, fairly recently, a year ago, I came out as non-binary. After years of just trying to figure things out and learning, so I'm excited to publicly come out as non-binary for all of you.
I also identify as non-binary and queer, and I just want to point out, like, we look insanely different from each other. I mean, that's just like something to point out, is that non-binary doesn't look like anything, just like female doesn't necessarily look like anything, male doesn't necessarily look like anything. Next question, when did you guys realize you weren't cisgender or heterosexual? Morgan?
So definitely when I was like 7, I used to go to YMCA day camp, and I was in the Chippewas, and we had like a football camp. And I just remember I wanted to go to the football camp, but not so I could be with guys, because they were all like hitting on the girls, and I was like, that's kind of cool, that's kind of fun. And also I wanted to do push-ups, so. Sunday.
Keith?
So I didn't talk to my father, so that gave me more than enough reason to not be man. So yeah, like growing up in a household where you're just like forced to play this masculine role, it just was not for me, honestly. And then when I came out gay, then the question is, well, do you want to be a woman? And I'm like, do I have to be a woman to like men? I mean, is that the requirement to like men? So over time, I just was like, you know what? Why can't I just like? Many people who know me in the same community and outside know me as Keith. They don't know me as that man Keith, you know. So I was just like, you know what? Let me stick with this. Let me just be in this gray area rather than figure out where I kind of fit it, basically.
For me, I realized when I wasn't cisgender or heterosexual. Keith brought up the good point of fitting into social norms. And growing up with one older brother who was hard of hearing and 2 younger brothers, I was always forced into a feminine gender role. And, you know, I could do it, you know, I could wash dishes, do laundry, you know, I could do all of that. But I'm also much more than the role that, you know, society has placed on me. And so being that diverging kind of person, I just knew that I didn't like the label. It didn't feel right with me. Nate talked about physical symptoms of just like being distressed, and I highly felt distressed at any time someone mentioned or referred to me as a girl. I'm a 3rd-year nursing student and I'm in clinical right now, and every old lady I take care of always compliments on how I'm a beautiful girl and I'm a beautiful woman. Thank you, but you know, it's a good gesture, but it's just something I don't align with. And it's not that it's wrong. It's not that, you know, they're intending to harm me by calling me a beautiful girl. It's just something that I don't identify with. Next question. What does it mean for you as young individuals living in a society to identify being in the LGBTQIA+ community?
It has been, I mean, one, it's amazing to finally find myself in this community after so long, because 7 is a young age, very silly, very not knowing what was going on, just knowing that I was different than the majority of my friends and different than people in my hometown, in my school. So I kind of forced myself into theater because, I mean, there's a little pocket of queer community there if you didn't know. So once I realized why I was in there, and then I found the larger queer community in my adult life, it's just been so comforting to know that I can be authentically myself around these people. I don't have to force myself into any boxes that I don't want to. That being said, it definitely is still something that I'm wary of being out in the public, where, like Nate said, we're only 10% of the population. So I know I'm going to be perceived possibly differently everywhere that I go, but there's a point in your life where the fear of being different is not as strong as the fear of forcing yourself to stay the same.
Keith?
So I feel like I've always been out. It's just that people were just late to the party and just like figuring out like who I was. And then when people started figuring out, aka my family, they were very just like, I don't know about that. And then I was like, but this is something I am. I can't force myself to be something else. Like I feel like growing up, I was always different in different ways. Like I was bad at homeschool. I was, well, academically was great in school. There was just things that I was different from my family, and being gay just took the cake. It was just the topic of it all. So when I started finding out more about myself and being involved in my community, I didn't start going to like centers for queer people until I was like 14, 15, 16. And that's when I met people just like me who literally were like, welcome. And I was like, yes. And then I just realized like over time, I was like, being gay is acting fierce. Like I love it. Like, I love my community. I love being queer. I love being different. It's so fun because it's that I don't know, it's that rush of feeling like you don't have to be what they want you to be. And because of that, I took that and I was like, well, I'm gonna wear makeup. I'm gonna do my nails. I'm gonna do things that are not traditional for males to do. And so over time, I was like, you know what? There are people who are just like me that can't do these things. So I try to do these things for the people who can. You know, I grew up in the Bronx, New York. You don't really see a lot of people with booty shorts on and like waving their pride flags and saying that's all. Like it's like you have to like put them front, and it's like I could not do that for long. So over time I was just like, you know what? Let me create something, an outlet where people can feel like they can be themselves and love themselves just like I do. So just to give you a little bio of who I am. 4 years ago, I created a club called Love. It was the first LGBTQ organization on Albany campus. It ran for 2 years. And honestly, right now, I'm in shock to see all of you here because 4 years ago, it did not look like this. It was like a piece of what it looks like right now. And so that's why this work is important. That's why me being myself and everyone being themselves is extremely important because of this. Our community grows when we start being themselves. So I hope that answered your question. I'm sorry, I'm kind of like jumping off.
Alexa, can I jump in as an older member?
Yeah.
And I think it's important for me to personally weigh in right now because, I've lived a longer life by far than all of you have, and have lived over time as being a member of the LGBTQ plus community grew in acceptance, right? It became more and more normal. But as a cisgendered woman, I had the privilege of not having to disclose that to people if I didn't want to. So there's a layer of privilege there that some people don't have, right? He's Black. He can't not let you know he's Black, but you didn't have to know that I was gay if I didn't want to tell you. And then as I grew older and had children, you can't not let people know, right? If you're going to the doctor because your kid's sick, or if the school calls you and your kid has 2 moms, everybody knows that. Not that I really was big at keeping it a secret, but so over time, the community looks at your family differently. And for the most part, we've been embraced and we've been lucky to have wonderful people in our school community and doctors and nurses and so on. But then my kids live that life too, right? Some of the friends say, oh my God, you're so lucky. You have 2 moms. I wish I had 2 moms. My dad's a jerk. There's some of that. And then there's other kids who give them a hard time for it. So they have to walk that path too. But the representation part's important. And I'm going to just tell a brief remembrance of my own from about 5 years ago in the summer when I was meeting students who were attending a summer program on the Albany campus. And I introduced myself and I identified as a member of the LGBTQ plus community. And there was a student in the room who just about jumped out of his seat and was so pleased to hear someone say that. And for Keith, that moment gave him that welcome, right? That there is someone here like me, and he came and spoke to me afterwards, and I could see that he felt so relieved that someone identified in a way that he understood. And so it's important to represent and to be in the front for people to know that it's okay, and there's lots of us here, and this community is welcoming to all people.
I'm so sorry. Is there anything I say something? Because I love what you just said. You actually just reminded me of something. I'm also black. I'm black. Yeah, I'm black. What I would say to yourself is coming into stage, and then before I was in that stage, I'm reminded every day that not only am I queer, I'm black as well. Most of the people I have surround myself with are black and queer as well. We all are bonded by our struggles. We are all bonded by two things: racism and homophobia. And coming into stage in the PWI was, of course, culture shock, but also I'm sitting here thinking, okay, so will I be more accepted here being queer, or will I be more accepted here being black? Like, it was just kind of like vice versa for me. I was always thinking about, well, where do I fit in as someone black and queer, especially in a community that's predominantly white. And so when I created Love, I didn't just think about the queer community. I also thought about the black and queer community, because there are people who are in the black and queer community that don't feel that type of representation. Maybe they feel representation for being queer, but the black part, that's equally as important. So I also want to, just voice that as well. Not only are me, like Morgan, we're not only queer, we're also of color. And so I just want you to all realize that having these conversations are extremely important, not as queer people, but as for black queer people as well. Because that, again, your race is equally as important as your sexuality, as your gender identity.
Thanks, Keith. To answer the question myself, like Keith said, I love being queer. And there was a moment in my life where I thought I could be straight. I really thought that I could do it. If you didn't know me in high school, I had really long hair, like long, straight girl hair. And I thought I could do it. I always put myself in heterosexual relationships. I was fine being the one that is held instead of holding someone. And I thought I could do it. I really did. And then I went to college. I was exposed, being alone and figuring out my gender and my sexual identity. And to be a young individual in the LGBTQ community, it just means that someone younger than me is looking at me to be a role model. Someone younger than me is looking to be that voice. And yeah, just love being queer. Next question. How has your identity impacted your college experience and your public expression?
Public expression wise, I feel like I'm just kind of finding out who I am. As someone who grew up in a super white, super rural town, I really didn't express myself when I was younger. I mainly hid my body. I almost had an eating disorder when I was younger, so that's another way on top of it. But it was kind of like, not to be cheesy, but I did feel like a butterfly when I came to college. I was like, oh my gosh, like I can go to the thrift store, I can try out new things. And sometimes they look horrible, but I don't care as long as I'm comfortable and I feel like myself now. And that is something I've never been able to say before, which is super cool. And I forgot the first half of the question. That'll be my answer for this round then.
Keith?
Just to take it back in 2017, like I said, that's when my freshman year started. Again, this looked a lot different than it does now. There was a lot of students. I would say there were very few queer people in the campus overall, and there were very few people in my cohort. So when I moved to Sage, I was pretty much the most flamboyant person, a freshman in my class. There's also people here who can attest to that. And during that time, I would just say, I'm gonna be me, but and what where will I finally fit in and be comfortable with me and not have to feel like, okay, I'm not going here. That's honestly why I create love. Truth be told, I wish I didn't have to create love. I wish that there was a way that community here for me to feel comfortable in being my flamboyant self. But sadly, that wasn't the case, and that's why I was like, you know what, something needs to change. And that's why when I created love, my ultimate goal was not only to make an outlet for people like me, but also to meet other people like me. You know, this is a fairly small school. So when you are the most flamboyant person in your cohort, or the most flamboyant person in the campus, it gets to you. And it, you know, sometimes it makes you feel like, should I be doing this? Like, it makes you question yourself a lot. And I question myself a lot during that time. So honestly, my identity at Sage meant so much to me, to the point where I was willing to put myself out there, let people know I am who I am, even in a small school like this, just to let people know, please don't be afraid, please be you. I'm doing it. You see me wearing things that I would never wear when I was back in Bronx. So like Morgan said, when I went to Sage, I felt like, you know, well, I guess I'll take my mom, whatever. I felt like there's freedom. But then again, here's freedom, but then who else is like me to build for you as well? Over time, I've met amazing friends who are here in the audience as well, who allow me to be like, hey, finally I'm not alone. We can all be free together. But that took some time. And again, like for any freshman year, who's feeling the same way, it will take time. You're not going to reach your first friend and be like, yes, we're free together. Yay. You might be 10 friends in where you'll feel like, okay, I finally found the one that can understand me, and we can finally be free together. But like I said, coming here was probably the best decision I made because one, it's smaller, and I feel like I was able to make an even bigger impact in myself.
As a person who's been the only openly non-binary student in my nursing classes, I'm always the example. I'm always the one being looked at and asked about my pronouns and asked about my gender identity. And so coming into college with that, I kind of expected it, but also creating the safe space might help others too come out, and in your own time, obviously. But yeah, my gender identity has allowed me to not only share my stories, but also be that example in a classroom setting. What are your desires for the Russell Sage College community in regards to inclusive language?
I definitely want it to be commonplace for, I just want them to feel comfortable. As someone who uses she and they pronouns, I do run into it a lot where people will only call me by she because, oh, well, your hair is kind of longer and you kind of look like a she. And it sometimes makes me feel like half of my identity is being dismissed, as if like they're forgetting this really big piece of me, like, hey, like, I'm non-binary, I do use she, but I don't identify as a girl, I don't identify as a woman. So I just really hope that with a lot of conversations like this and a lot of work with policy and training, and it is going to be uncomfortable, but that's because it's necessary. I just want to get to a place where, you know, everyone feels as reflected inward as they do outwardly.
And again, I'm bringing back when I first started here. Things are way, not way different, but we're getting there. We're starting to have these conversations. We're starting to realize what needs to be done. I value respect. You know, you're not going to be around my space and be around the people I hang with without respecting one another or respecting me and respecting who I am as a person, because I won't do too much to be disrespected. One thing I will say in regards to the Sage community, because these conversations are starting to happen, even though, you know, these conversations are already been happening for years. We're getting to a point where now we're in a bigger space, there's larger groups of people. Now, everyone should know, respect each other's pronouns, also just respect each other in general. If you don't know anything, like I said, this is an academic institution for a reason. Education is key. Educate yourself. Being blissfully ignorant should not be an excuse anymore at all, because we're all intellects. We're all here for a reason. We all value our mind. So it shouldn't be hard to not respect one another just because whatever is possible. I will say, my main focus for this conversation in general, personally, is for safe faculty. I know that all of us have experienced certain things in regards to safe faculty. We have our favorites, we have our, so I want the focus also to be on safe faculty, to also be a part of these conversations as well. I want to see professors here. I want to see anyone who is a part of safe faculty to be here as much as I do safe students. Because this conversation is not just for us, this conversation is for everyone. And so respecting each other is a big thing. Educating each other is another big thing. If you don't know anything, please ask us. I always tell people, if you don't know what to call me, ask me. I'm not gonna bite you at all, unless you try it. But I think, yeah, just ask, ask questions, honestly. But yeah.
And that's like a mini addendum, like change is difficult, but if you care about a person, you respect a person, try. I've had a lot of my friends come out to me during our relationship and their identity and their pronouns change. Sit in the mirror and practice using their pronouns, practice using their name, change your contact, change your email, just like do the little things that may seem silly when you're single alone, because that's what's going to show the people in your life that you respect them, that you love them, that you hold space for them. It's going to literally, it can be the difference between someone living or not.
Yeah, I think just a general desire is just to make it common, to make it normal so that it doesn't seem like a different thing. You know, transgender people literally trans means different. And so it's embedded into the word, it's embedded into the language. And so practicing, again, correcting yourself if you make a mistake. Don't be like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. Like, okay, we get it, you're sorry. Correct yourself, making sure that it is gonna be normal in the near future. Last question, what can individual?
Can I interrupt you now, Aleka? Sorry, it's my turn. So I just wanted to quickly say, because I've been it's been bouncing around my head. Two things. One, Morgan brought up something that I just want to be the nerd in the room about, because it is we're at a college right now, and I love data and research. There's actually something called visibility management, and it's research about queer people. And that we do one of two things. We hide our identity because we don't think it'll be safe for us to say it out loud, or we talk about our identity because it's not healthy for us in our minds to keep hiding it. But we only do the second thing when we feel safe. And feeling safe is not our job. So if we're going to move away from the mental health risks that come along with hiding your identity, then we need spaces where people feel safe enough to come out. That's one. So to Morgan's piece around, like, I don't know when I'm going to say, maybe I'll say it today, maybe I won't. Like, we do that. All of us do that every single day. It's gymnastics that we go through every single day. But then two, just to something that Keith had said, I've been saying for a long time now, if ignorance is bliss, then bliss is privilege. So if you get to walk around and pretend like you don't know anything about any of this that we're talking about today, or if you leave here and you're like, yeah, but whatever, I'll just stay ignorant of it. Cool, that's full on privilege. It's full on. As I say to like my straight cisgender, brother who I love to death, but he doesn't experience the layer of oppression that I do. Every time you say, oh, politics just don't really excite me that much, I'm not into it, privilege. Because your marriage rights weren't just brought up in the Supreme Court hearings a week and a half ago. but mine were. Privilege. So ignorance is bliss 100%, and that bliss is privilege. So that's all. Sorry.
Nick. Last question. What can individual members of the RSC community do to better support LGBTQIA students, and more specifically, non-binary students?
Yeah, I mean, I would say from like a younger technological point of view, add some variety to your Instagram feed. Like, go out of your way, follow some non-binary creators. Like, that's how you're going to start understanding more perspectives if you don't, per se, know those people in your life yet, which I'm sure they're there. So, I mean, get out and talk to people in your community too. Ask, read books. Baylock on Instagram is one of my favorite people. He has a great book. It's like $8 is real thick, real easy to read, thin, sorry. And it's called Young Binary, and it really just talks about everything that we're discussing here, and it's a personal account too. So whatever medium you like to receive information through, give it some variety, switch it up, add some Black creators there too, please. Like, just, you can do it, it's so fun.
I'm gonna agree with Morgan, so honestly, we're everywhere. Honestly, like, even though we're 10%, we're still everywhere. We're washing our cars, we're doing laundry with you, like, you know, we're eating lunch with you. So it's honestly important to know that you just can't assume someone something without asking them or just talking to them. You know, this conversation like these can be harsh and really hard to talk about. And we're not saying, oh, if you're not gonna respect our pronouns, you should die. No, we're saying, please put yourself out there or put yourself in that person's shoes sometimes and just try to understand what that person may be going through. Because that's also really as important. So yeah, like that's what Morgan said, like, have some variety, have some conversations with different people. If you know someone is queer, if you're friends with queer people, have a conversation with them about, hey, like, what's it like, being you? I've had straight people ask me, like, oh, like, what's it like being you? And what's it like living your life? And, I explain to them, this is it. And then they hear it out, and they're like, wow. And he's like, give me money now. Listen, reparations, please. But yeah, no, just like Morgan said, same thing. It's back home.
Yeah, I think one of the main things is that we can do is just to be aware of like your inner monologue, like your thoughts. Be aware that you might not know everything about a person when you first see them. And so creating that blank slate of a person in your head to make sure that when you do ask them questions and you do ask, like, say, about their gender identity, that you're taking in all of that information, that you're just being aware. And again, how we've reiterated so many times, don't assume. And if you don't know, just ask. That concludes our panel. Woo! I would just like to say thank you to the panelists here with me and Critical Conversations, again, the subcommittee for the DEI task force. Again, I'm the president of the Queer Collective, the new LGBTQIA club at Russell Sage. If you are interested in joining, just find me at the end. We're looking to, do more stuff, support local businesses here like Cafe Euphoria, who need some financial help. And again, these conversations should not stop here, and more discussions need to happen, whether that be another panel or in your personal lives. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
So I think if you have this at 4 o'clock, you might have printing faculty coming. So if you do this again, I know it's challenging. This is wonderful, Charlotte.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Doing my best, folks.
Thank you, everyone. Bye, Nate. Thank you.
Bye, thanks, y'all.
Good job.
Yes, great job. I know.
Great. You did great. Thanks.